All right, so we're diving into Vantage Plus's latest breakdown of what's happening in crypto. They dropped this analysis today, March 24th, 2025, and one thing that really jumps out is this push and pull we're seeing across the market.
Yeah, definitely a lot of mixed signals out there. Not really clear if we're leaning bullish or bearish just yet.
Right. Right.
So what we're going to do today is really dig into their analysis and hopefully pull out some of the most important insights, especially for Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple, and Solana.
Sounds good. So maybe we can start with just like a general overview. Like, what are the big things these analysts are pointing to?
Well, one of the first things they highlight is, well, potentially good news for the U.S. crypto scene. Sounds like the SEC is trying to get a better handle on how security laws apply to all this, which, could actually be a good thing.
How so?
Well, if things are clearer, less uncertainty. And CoinDesk actually had some data backing that up, and there's also this whole thing with the SEC looking into NFTs more closely. They've got a meeting coming up specifically on that.
Interesting. So more regulation, but maybe in a way that actually helps the market.
Potentially, yeah. At least in the medium term, that's what the report suggests.
It's okay. It makes sense. Now, the report also mentioned something about politics, right?
Yeah, they pointed out that since Trump came into office, there's been, well, let's call it a warmer attitude from lawmakers towards crypto.
Yeah.
Could be another factor lending some support to the market.
Okay. So we've got some potential positives, but obviously the market is still pretty shaky right now.
Absolutely. That whole battle between the bulls and bears is definitely still playing out.
So for someone trying to, actually make sense of all this, what should they be paying attention to, especially outside of crypto?
Vantage Plus really stresses keeping an eye on the NASDAQ. Historically, it's been a pretty reliable indicator for where crypto's headed. Over 70% accuracy, they say.
Wow. Okay. So tech stocks could be a good leading indicator.
Exactly. Now let's zoom in on Bitcoin. What's it looking like technically?
Well, right now Bitcoin's sitting around $84,380. The analysis, though, it says we could see a little upward bump in the short term, but medium term, there's still a decent chance of things heading south.
Yeah, makes sense. One thing they really emphasized was how Bitcoin hasn't been able to bust through that all-time high resistance above $100,000.
And when that happens?
Well, a lot of times it means the price is going to test lower support levels. In this case, they're thinking we could see a slide down to the $75,000 zone.
Okay. Support zone. So basically,
think of it as a price level where historically there have been a lot of buyers stepping in. So it might, stop the bleeding, so to speak.
Right. But what if it holds?
If that $75,000 level holds strong, well, then we might see Bitcoin take another run at breaking through that $100,000 ceiling.
Gotcha. Now, what about Ethereum? Looks like it's around $1,991 right now.
Yeah, and that dip below the $2,000 mark, that's definitely something to be mindful of. Could mean more downward pressure.
Yikes.
Ethereum right now, it looks like it's stuck in this sideways channel between these trend lines. Could break out either way, but right now the momentum seems to be pointing down. They're even talking about it potentially hitting the $1,200 area.
Whoa, okay, that's a pretty big drop. Anything good there, though, for long-term holders?
The analysis does mention that if it hits those lower levels, could be a buy the dip opportunity. If you're thinking long-term with ETH, that is.
So potential opportunity amidst the chaos.
Exactly. All right, let's move on to Ripple. What's the latest there? It's currently sitting at $2.3888.
Well, it looks like Ripple's kind of in the same boat as Ethereum, stuck in a sideways pattern, hasn't really tried to break out. And they're saying long-term, we could see it test lower prices again.
The thing that really stands out here is this potential head and shoulders pattern they're seeing on the charts. That kind of formation can signal a trend reversal.
Meaning?
Well, it could mean that Ripple's upside is capped around $2.9 billion.
Okay. Anything on the downside to watch out for?
Yeah, if it drops below $2.1 billion, things could get ugly fast. We might even see it plummet back below $1.
Oh, that would definitely hurt. All right, last but not least, let's talk about Solana. Trading at $130.16 right now. Seems like things are looking a little brighter for Solana compared to the others.
Yeah, the analysis is actually pretty bullish on Solana. They think we might see another upward push.
What's making them so optimistic?
Well, on the weekly chart, there's a support zone around $120 that they think is going to hold.
And if it does?
If it does, we could see Solana rise to that next resistance zone, which is up at $185. They also mentioned keeping an eye on the 50 moving average trend line, which is around $165 right now.
Okay, so explain that one to me. What's the significance of the moving average?
Think of it as a line that shows the average price over a specific period. If the price breaks above that line, it can be a sign that buying momentum is picking up. So for Solana, breaking above that $165 mark, that would be a pretty good sign.
Okay, that makes sense. So to do a quick recap here, it sounds like, overall sentiment's mixed. Traditional markets are definitely playing a role. Bitcoin, Ethereum might bounce a bit in the short term, but could be in for some rough waters in the medium term. Ripple's got some pretty big downside risk if it breaks below those key levels. And then Solana, well, Solana seems to be the bright spot with the potential for another nice rally.
That's a great summary. This Vantage Plus analysis, it really underscores how important it is to pay attention to both the broader market trends and these specific price levels for each coin.
Definitely. And I think what's even more interesting to think about is how all these different things we've talked about, the regulations, the NASDAQ, how they all might end up shaping the future for Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple, and Solana.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to consider.
It is. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone.
Thanks for having me.